Welcome to San Antonio, Jeff.
Hey, thanks, George. So good to be down here. Beautiful weather, beautiful place to be down here.
Jeff's in town, and we don't ever get to have this opportunity to sit down and talk and interview Jeff. Jeff's always the one on the run, and he's always interviewing somebody else. But I wanted to talk to Jeff today about politics and what we should be doing as parents this political season. Elections are we're having early voting next week,
Hmm.
and we got some powerful players that we think we need to keep in office, and we need some of these judges to be removed. And so I want to talk to Jeff a little bit about politics. And if you're watching, I'm going to tell you why it's important to be involved with your local politicians, your candidates, because at the end of the day, when you're in family court, some of these judges are ruling with no authority. They don't. They're not following their rules. They're not following the laws. They're basically legislating from the bench. So it's important that we remove um, these uh, these elected officials whom the people voted in. We vote them out. So what do you think about that, Jeff?
Well, I think that what you're talking about, George, is very important. First off, let me say that for Supreme Court Justice John Devine, 100%, 100%, he is the man that we need to be behind. I love John Devine. I mean, I've talked with him many times. I met him at a Texas Values Policy Conference about 6 years ago. I read one of his cases and one of his decisions that he wrote, and I'm like, wow, this is great. And that's how I first met him. And it's kind of funny because he says, "You read this? Like you're an odd duckling or something like that." But the thing is that we think about politicians a lot of times. We don't think about how judges actually perhaps may have more impact on your life than even the politicians. No matter what the laws are that are passed, if you have a judge who wants to interpret things his way or her way, the laws can be almost nullified in a sense. And often, if for people that have been involved with following the judges and judicial corruption and stuff like that, it's very seldom that a judge actually gets removed or sanctioned with judicial corruption. It's very seldom that the State Commission on Judicial Conduct really disciplines somebody, or if they do, it's kind of like a little, oh, don't do that again, naughty, naughty, naughty.
It's a
I'm
self. I mean, they're a self-governing agency, so they take care of their people.
right.
It's no different from any other union. Whether you're in a police officers union, a fireman's union, that union is going to take care of you and take care of its workers. It's going
Right.
to make sure that, the people that they take care of, they're going to make sure that there's food on the plate. They're not. They're going to be concerned with wages. They're not going to discipline one of our brothers and sisters that took the state bar. I mean, the SCJC has had my grievance on Sandra Peak for more than 2.5 years.
So, and George, this is an interesting thing that you mentioned, and we will talk about politicians as well, but I write reports for the federal government. And so I know a little bit about writing the report. Now, the first time I filed the complaint with the State Commission on Judicial Conduct, I had no idea what I was doing. But I've learned since then, and I've gone on, and I know what should be included. I think I probably have filed at least a half a dozen or more complaints, solid complaints, and somehow there's just not enough evidence. Somehow you just haven't proved it, but you can submit for reconsideration. So, like George is saying, when you have it almost seems like a gaggle of attorneys and judges protecting each other. It gets very discouraging, but we still have to keep doing it. And that's why when you talk about judges and everything, judges can have a big impact on your life,
Sure,
but
sure.
politicians as well.
Yeah, I mean, judges, politicians, state reps, state senators, we need to know. And I understand there's people on different sides of the aisle. I understand some people are more conservative and more liberal, and you might even like the color blue better than you do red, or you don't like the red magma hat. I don't care what aisle or side of the aisle you're on, but and with me, I never vote red or blue. I never vote Democrat or straight Republican tickets, because I honestly think that there's good people out there that are running for political office. And when I meet those people, I ask them to see if their ideologies, their agenda, their platforms all align with what I'm putting down. And if y'all aren't for certain, Jeff and I are both family court reform advocates. We advocate that there be transparency and accountability because Jeff's right. When these judges are making these lifelong decisions for you and your child, it's very important that we know who we're electing, putting into that seat. And if these judges are just violating the law and legislating from the bench, we have a big problem. And all of our children. And some of y'all that are going through this might think, hey, this doesn't pertain to me. It doesn't pertain to you now, but it's going to either pertain to you in the future or your children might be involved with this. 60% of marriages are ending up in divorce, right?
Well, there's a lot of different ways you could look at that. I don't quite believe that, but on the other hand, if you talk about people that have cohabited with each other that break up, there's a lot of ways to look at that. That figure, I think, has been perhaps misinterpreted and it's been skewed a little bit. But the reality is, I think what you're getting down to is, number one, a lot of people are not going into marriage for life. They have a trial marriage in a sense. If I get out of it, if I don't like it, I can get a divorce. And other people are saying, wait a minute, I've seen what divorce does to people. I'm not going to enter into marriage at all. And what we know is this, is that strong marriages are the absolute best environment to rear children. In a family, not orphans on a street, not being raised up in some institution, not being raised up by somebody's boyfriend or girlfriend. It's the natural mother and father. And part of the reason for marriage that we have it as in the state, it's to bring the mother and father together, to bind them together so that this unit will provide the best environment for children.
And I brought that up in a TikTok video. Are men losing interest in having a relationship these days? We have to ask ourselves, and I'm not trying to be selfish, but what do I get out of it other than child support, a broken home, children that are mentally and emotionally broken, having to go to court, having to litigate, having to spend a retirement on attorneys just because, some of us got into a relationship early. If I could go back and I could talk to my 20-year-old self, I would say, hey man, don't be getting into any relationships. Don't be having any kids right now. The world is changing, and it seems like there's a lot of young girls, teenage girls, that are growing up, without a father, and they're looking for outlets like TikTok and social media to, get that attention. And my daughter, not to be excluded, we've had our issues, but it's terrible when these women are expecting to have a breakup, be a single mom, obtain child support. There's no incentive for a man to want to get into a relationship. I don't have a house. There's no retirement. Everything in my world is broken, and it all comes down to the judiciary.
So let's talk a little bit about the family court issue. Family courts, as they are today, have become a monstrosity. The Texas Family Code is a monstrosity. It's 1,600 pages. And just think about this. It's the government telling you how you should run your family. Why do we even have family law? And I've been reading this one book. It's by Jane Spinnick. It's called I think it's The End of Family Court. And she is an attorney. She's been around for 35, 40 years. Talks about the history of the family court. The family court is a racist institution. A family court often punishes people that are in poverty. And what she's done, she's gone through this, and no matter what the intent of the family court was, like a chameleon, it keeps changing its colors and its skin and everything else. It keeps surviving. But it is an institution that has caused more damage, heartache, bankruptcy, people being brought up without their father or mother, than almost anything you can imagine. And what we really start to need to change the conversation to, in my opinion, is we need to abolish family court. I believe the family court is unconstitutional. It's unjust. That's enough in itself. But again, it has racist origins. It has origins in which they punish people that are innocent. And what I will say is this, for example, and I do have this. This is, George, thank you for picking this up for me. I left this at the last event we were at together. but it is a petition for writ of certiorari. It's talking about the issue of unilateral no-fault divorce. When you get married, the state will tell you, oh, you're having this wonderful relationship. You have to get a marriage license, usually. What is the state's responsibility? The state issues a license, takes your money, and then washes its hands of you. Except if you get divorced, in which the state always, without exception, 100% of the time, sides with the person who wants a divorce. For any reason? For no reason. They can make up a reason. Doesn't make a difference. So the institution of marriage, which is good for our society, good for the state, good for our communities, has absolutely no legal protection, because all I have to do is say, my marriage is insupportable. Nobody knows what that means. It's not defined. I can leave for any reason, for no reason. I can commit perjury, and I can be rewarded for abandoning that which is good, not only for my children, but for society, and I can get money from it.
I mean, it goes back to, who files first, right? We know that the majority of the time the women file for divorce first, mainly because they're unhappy. Men are complacent. They're happy with, food on the table, a roof, but we're seeing the shift in society where there's this independentness from these women, and I think this topic needs to be talked about,
Right.
because there's so many people that have been told it's taboo to talk about. Don't talk about your family court case. We don't want anything to spoil it. We don't want your children to know. No, my children need to know
Right.
that the reason I'm not in their lives is because the judiciary is playing games, right? They're legislating from the bench. They're not upholding their laws. They're
There are attorneys who have friendships with the judges.
yeah.
And therefore, because I have donated to this judge's campaign, I'm going to get special treatment. It happens. We know it. Attorneys will tell you about it.
We've seen it. We've reported it.
Yeah, we have absolutely done that too. But
Where'd your reports go? No.
well, it's interesting because the last report I think I filed was an ethics complaint against Judge Mary Brown. And I even had an attorney help me draft this, right? So we had everything. It was 100% clear. Mary Brown was acting unethically. She was violating the state campaign finance laws. And the ethics commission, or the lack of ethics commission, I would say instead, said, well, keep filing. Did you do anything to her? Well, we can't tell you whether we punished her or not, but just keep filing whenever you see something. And this is the case. When you see something, you should say something.
Right.
We have a voice to speak out against injustice and to praise the things that are right. And there are judges, George, that I've praised.
Yeah.
And there are good people that I've praised. But we also cannot be afraid to use our voices to say, this is corrupt, this is evil, this is unjust, this is exploitive. You should be in jail.
You shouldn't be treating us like that.
No,
First of all.
no. And the idea that, so here you have a family. Now, the government has its own set of problems, right? I mean, who trusts the government? But the government is going to say, we're going to write laws for you, George, on how to run your family.
They can't control the border. They can't control child support. They can't control their family court.
I do not want to co-parent with the government.
No.
And really, when it comes right down to it, some of the things that they say, they may get a couple of things right on occasion. Great suggestions, and maybe we should follow them. But in so many things, they're wrong. Look, we have government officials telling us that a biological boy can become a girl. That is nuts. Oh, we call it transgenderism. There is no such thing as a transgender gene. Same thing, a biological girl. You can take her in, 13, 14 years of age, cut off her breast. Sorry about that. Throw them in the incinerator. And that's child abuse. That is absolute child abuse. But our government is permitting that.
And one of the things that I harp on a lot is perjury. And
Oh,
I don't think people
rampant.
should lie in family court. And when they lie, they need to be prosecuted. I mean, just because you're a judge doesn't give you the discretion to break the law or not prescribe justice. And that's an issue that's big in my case, is that there's a lot of perjury, and they don't care whether there's perjury or not. They're just going to give the child to whoever they believe is treating the child within the child's best interest. But when you go in and you're
What does that mean? Wait a minute. The
What?
child's best interest, what does that mean?
They don't have a definition.
They don't have
for
a
it,
definition for that.
right? Just like abuse, and this is one of my questions that I pose to everybody. What is your definition of abuse? I used to get yelled at as a kid. I think a lot of kids got yelled at. Doesn't necessarily mean it rises to the extent of abuse. I was spanked. You know, I was hit with a chancla. We're in San Antonio. It's something that happens here in San Antonio to every other family, right? But when you go in and you make a statement about abuse and nobody is correcting it or nobody's trying to, because it's definitely child abuse when you're making lies about the other parent that you know are untrue. I mean, because now you're ripping that other child. So at the bottom line, you know, these judges, if you're noticing a specific pattern with these judges and the way they rule, with certain attorneys, with certain law firms like Coons Fuller, right? There's judges that kind of sway Coons Fuller way all the time, and stuff like that. Y'all need to recognize that pattern and expose it. And then during election time, when election season comes around and you have early voting, you need to interview the judicial candidates that are running against these judges that are in that robe or on that bench, and ask those hard questions. What was some of the hard questions we were talking about?
So I don't remember all of them right now, but I mean, I do know that I have done this because, again, my biggest issue that got me involved in this, George, was the issue of no-fault divorce. It's one thing if two people mutually decide to get a divorce, but when you force divorce against somebody, you lack due process. You get to take his property or her property. You get to take the children, rip them apart. I mean, that's a big issue for me. So I've always talked with judges about no-fault divorce, unilateral no-fault divorce. And I mean, I can tell you within about 30 seconds whether a judge, if they get it or don't get it. So that's one of the first questions I ask them. You can ask them, what does the best interest of the child mean? Why is there family law? And really, because when you come down to family law situations, what it comes down to is one attorney saying, well, this is a better parent. This parent does this parent does that. I look at parenting like this, George. We'll say if you're a 70% parent, you pass. If, you know, when I got my commissioning license for what I do, I had to hit a certain percentage. It didn't make a difference if I got a 75, if I got a 95. When you passed, you passed. And I think that we need to look at parents and just say, well, this is an 88% good parent, this is a 93% good parent. Or that, like, if a father is not at every school function, a father and a mother have different roles. And I mean, I would say that as well, if possible, you should only try to have a one-income family. Now, I'm not saying it's possible in every situation, right, but because children need to be reared by their parents. The mother, the father together, not by some agency so that both parents can go out and stuff like that. That's my opinion. But then again, when you look at a role of a father who's working 16 hours a day to provide a roof over the head of the family, to provide food, and then you say, but you don't know his first grade teacher's name, that is garbage. That is probably a feminist judge or somebody who's been inculcated with feminism who's saying, well, you know what, George, Jeff, Jim, Bob, whatever, you're not feminine enough. But the thing is, you need to be masculine and women need to be feminine. Of course, those things can change at various times, but children need a father and a mother. Not two mothers, not two fathers, sorry if that offends anybody. They need a father and a mother working together.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain things structural-wise. My dad was a disciplinarian, right? And you always hear, don't let me tell your dad. That was one thing that was brought up, you know, to me as a kid, time and time. You know, don't let me tell your dad. If I tell your dad, you're going to get in trouble. And there's times where I've been put in that situation where they wanted me to be the disciplinarian, and they said, well, Christopher, I'm going to tell your dad, and expecting me to be the disciplinarian, and then tell the court that I abused Christopher.
Right.
I mean, so
the interesting thing about abuse is that lack of discipline could be abuse.
Right.
You know, but the thing is, the script is always written a certain way. We know that the courts, they have their scripts, and really the courts are unjust. And once again, why do we have family courts? I don't understand. Because if you have committed no infraction against a law, why do you get punished? Because you're not parenting the way that we, the judge, or we, the attorneys, think that you should?
Yeah, there's parenting styles that are completely on one side of the spectrum to the other side.
Yeah.
And none of them are wrong. There's no way to teach you how to be a parent. You
Yeah.
know, there was home ec in high school, but that was it.
Yeah.
That was it.
And you make a very good point. Look at the difference in parenting styles between black families, Hispanic families, I'll say just Asian as a more general group of families, white families. I mean, we're Native American Indian families. There are different norms, but you know, when you come in and say, well, this one's right, this one's wrong. No, because in every society, every culture, there may be things that are unhealthy and healthier.
Right.
But children are reared and they become adults.
And the discretion, you know, the judges use their discretion. They don't want to lose that discretion. As one judge called in at the JJFI committee, she said she didn't want to lose her discretion. But discretion doesn't allow you to violate the law. Just because you have discretion doesn't mean I get to violate the law. I can go shoot somebody or stab somebody because I'm a judge.
Well, the other thing you've got to remember, though, too, if you look at some of these judges, for example, I'm a Christian. I believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. And if I have to appear in front of a homosexual judge who's going to tell me how to rear my children, or a lesbian judge, or a judge who's a swinger, why do they have, they should have absolutely no authority nor right to tell me what they think, how I should rear my children.
Yeah.
And especially like, you know, as a Christian, maybe you have a person who's an atheist, godless person. I'm sorry, but I do not, you might be doing some great things, and that's good and wonderful. But it also becomes a religious liberty issue because we need to be able to rear our children, inculcate them with our values, not a homosexual or lesbian judge's values.
Right. I mean, and I think that's what we're all here for, is when we say that we advocate for our children, I'm going to raise my child how I feel is necessary. And there's times when these parents want to come in and they want to override you because you're the non-custodial parent. They try to take your possession and access days away. They try to play games with you. They try to strong arm you because they're the custodial parent. And I don't agree with that. I think that there's, there we go. I think there's, you know, there needs to be times where we as parents need to speak up. And this is why we make these videos, right? We put them online, is we want to give parents, we want to motivate you to speak up. It's not against the law to ask people, why are you doing this? It's not against the law to, you know, help somebody with their campaign because you want to remove the other judge. It's not, a lot of people for years have been told, don't question the judge, right? And we live in 2024 where we have access through all our devices to find out what the rules the judge are supposed to be following, what laws the laws that judges should be following. So there's no reason why we shouldn't be second guessing, because again, it all comes down to, you know, our parenting style. I don't want to be a visitor. I don't want to see my child just the first, third, and fifth. And if I elect to see my child with more time, I should be able to have that that option.
But the question comes back down to, again, why should this be an issue? How much should you have to pay to be a father to your child or a mother to your child? And again, I'm saying both because it happens to both people. This whole family law industry, the one thing that Ana Maria Ramos said that was accurate, it is a business.
Correct.
It is a business. It's a big business. And I actually believe that the Attorney General should be investigating this business because they are engaged in price fixing. They are engaged in price gouging, and they know it. And attorneys will get together like we are right now, and they will collude and say, look, we know the outcome, what it's going to be, right? But we want to drag the procedure along because the more we drag the procedure along, the more we can charge $500 an hour and pretend like we're doing something. It's a charade.
Yeah, and what it is and this is the criminal side. The criminal side of this is that they're weaponizing their legal services, right? Anybody who weaponizes their knowledge for bad should be prosecuted under the law. So if I'm a lawyer and I'm using dirty legal tactics or unethical tactics in court just to remove Jeff from his child, that right there, that needs to be curbed with criminal prosecution.
Let me add something else to this too. The Attorney General for the state of Texas, Ken Paxton, if you look at what he makes per year in his position, it comes down to about $80 an hour, assuming he works an 80-hour week or a 40-hour week. And he's probably working more than that, but we'll say $80 an hour. We'll say double that because he gets benefits and retirement and health insurance or whatever. That's $160 an hour. Family law attorneys follow templates. Often they are considered the bottom dwellers of the law industry, and they can charge $500, $600, $700, and $100 an hour. Now, I think that those fees should be capped per hour, and I also think they should be capped in total. You know, so that you cannot go into and say, well, look at this guy has $1 million here. If we can probably take $300,000, it'll hurt him, he'll survive. But, you know, we get rich off of this instance of family court. They really shouldn't even be here. And I think that, yes, I absolutely believe if you look at the Federal Trade Commission, they want competition of prices. And yet when attorneys collude, they send out surveys amongst each other. How much do you charge? How much do you charge? Oh, you know what? They're charging $500. I'm only charging $400. I should up my rate.
So if you don't have money, you're already going to be excluded from your child's life.
Well, and the thing is that for 1 hour, for some people, that's a week's worth of wages, not including what you spend for rent or for food or anything else. But you're right. Gloria, there was one lady who said, you only get as much justice as you can afford. And that's why the family court injustice system, the anti-family injustice system, the family destruction industry needs to be exposed, needs to be abolished. And if you're a parent going through this, don't say, well, you know what? My attorney did this for me and helped me out. Your attorney took advantage of you in many instances and has sold you a bill of goods. You've been brainwashed. And you should not be saying, my goal is to bankrupt my ex-husband, my ex-wife. My goal is not to make the attorneys rich. This whole system is corrupt and rotten through and through. And we need people to say, we aren't taking it anymore.
Yep.
And we have, and the thing is that we're finding, George, I started to do this as a stopgap measure. I'm like, somebody who really knows what they're talking about should be able to do this. And, I was a voice of one crying in the wilderness, perhaps. But now we've got people that are so smart, people that are PhDs, people that are attorneys that are coming on our side, people that, the process.
What do you do?
I am a bank examiner.
Bank examiner. You run with numbers and all that stuff?
I do various things. I won't say too much.
And that's what I don't get. I don't get that we have these people that are educated with PhDs, doctorate degrees. We have people that work on fraud with banks. We have people that were firemen. We have people that have, a pretty good, a pretty good education background, right? Because you don't get that job as messing with bank fraud, with just a high school degree. You have people out there with college degrees that can read, that can write, that can research, that can publish, and that they can cite, their references, that are all doing pro se work just to be in their lives of their children.
Yeah.
And then you have these attorneys that are weaponizing their legal service just to take that father out. I mean, you look at Bradley Miller, very, very smart guy.
Smart, yeah. Extremely bright, intelligent.
And
the attorneys are afraid of him.
Yeah.
He's that good.
There's attorneys that are afraid of us because we make videos like this and post them online.
Yeah.
But we're treated like terrorists.
You were talking about fraud. So the interesting thing is in Austin, in the Capitol, there is the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. So they train people on how to, they certify them on how to become fraud examiners. So, and I've taken a number of courses with them and stuff like that, but I recently talked with them and I said, have you ever thought about fraud in the family court systems? Because, every 2 years they put out this report. It's called the Report to the Nation. They talk about fraud and how it's executed. Somehow there's no fraud with attorneys. I'm wondering, we have fraud here, we have fraud there, but there's never a class like, the attorneys are committing fraud, billing schemes, or bilking you, or lying, whatever, whatever you want to do. But I actually talked to them, I think a few months ago, and I started to talk about what takes place in the family courts. And they were a little bit shocked, and they said, would you submit like an outline of this? Now, I didn't have time to do it at the time, but it's something that I'm going to plan as a project to say, here's where I think that the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, right down in Austin, near the Capitol, should be teaching about fraud in our anti-family courts, fraud among the attorney industry, and they also have classes in government fraud. So there's a lot of fraud that's taking place here, and people that lie to you intentionally. We need to have people trained in this area as well as many other areas.
Yeah, I mean, legislative intent is how the law is written. And
right.
I love that phrase. Legislative intent is how the law is written. So if it says the apple is red, or don't go over the speed of 70 miles per hour, if you go over 71, you're in violation of that law, right? So I understand it. I get it. You have people that are educated, PhDs, doctorates, financial advisors. You have people of all types of educational backgrounds that are now being able to research in 2024 with AI and Google, and they're able to read what these judges are doing to them, what these lawyers are doing, and they're catching on. We become pro se, we start educating and teaching each other and motivating, saying you can do it, because you absolutely can, right? One of the things that Jeff brought up was some of these family law attorneys, they're known as bottom feeders, tilapia, right? They feed from the bottom.
Algae eaters.
They just
catfish.
Some of them that I've litigated against are not very smart. Carolyn Robertson can't even put the right date, court, cause number on her filings. And when you're a board certified attorney and you're making simple mistakes like that, you're not going over, you're not signing your motions before you go over to validate it's correct. You cost the other litigant money and time and mental and emotional frustration, because now not only do they have to work with your broken piece of work, but you're a board certified attorney for over 30 years and you're producing this, right? So parents are starting to come on board. They're starting to identify these abusive patterns by these family courts, and I like to call them family practices. I mean, they're not family practices, but I like to call them dadgum, now I got a brain fart. Abusive practices, legal practices.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those.
The whole thing is based on fraud.
Yeah.
The entire system is based on fraud and lies. That's what it is. It's a scam.
These are business practices. That's what I meant to say, business practices. These are business.
They're corrupt business practices.
Right. And when
they're collusive business practices. They are colluding to price fix and to price gouge. It is what it is. It's very simple. And and some attorneys are saying the exact same thing. I mean, I've talked about price fix, and they said, because then usually the attorney says, well, no, that's not price fixing. We have to be able to charge this. This is the free market. And then after, an attorney will come up to me and say, it's price fixing. Everybody knows it's price fixing. It's as plain as day. It's price fixing and it's price gouging.
Yeah, and this is where all of this needs to come to an end. At the end of the day, start identifying these patterns, these abusive business practices that I was just talking about, and identify the people that hang around each other. A lot of these lawyers like to go on camping trips with their judges.
With their judges, yeah,
in
I know.
Wendy Perry's story.
Yeah.
So they do fraternize with each other. And when you see these groups of individuals at certain places on their social media, you can almost bet that they're going to sway towards their friends and their relationship with that friend. And so, again, when you go out there and political season's coming out, you start advocating or you start helping campaign with these people that are running for state rep, state senator, judge, sheriff, or even a Supreme Court justice. Make sure that their views align with yours. But I just wanted to drop a real quick video.
Hey, I want to say something else here too, because this whole industry is against the family. No matter what they say, oh, we're working for the family, they are against the family. And what I think that we also need to be looking at is that we, as the parents, like for example, that documentary, We the Parents, we are the parents. We are the ones that have to be protecting our children. Our children are entrusted to us, not to the state, not to attorneys, not to guardian ad litems, not to judges who can be bought and purchased, and attorneys that have said about judges they don't know the law. I mean, that's just a fiasco. But we need to get people in every aspect of this. So for example, one of the things that I've wanted to do, and maybe I will be able to do it this year, a couple of things depends upon the others, but we should be starting mediation services. We don't have to have an attorney mediate for you. Attorneys want to take this over so that it's another source of income.
How about depositions?
Depositions, the same thing. And I will say this, one of the biggest failures of our church is that our church has not stood up against this industry. Our church, there was one church that I was going to, and I asked them and I brought up some of these things. Of course, one of the elders was an attorney, and I talked about the family law industry, and he said, well, we have some family law attorneys right here on our church board or on whatever. And I'm like, if you're going to take this, and I'm not saying everyone's bad, but I want to know, did you ever litigate a unilateral no-fault divorce? Did you ever force a divorce? Because if you did, you are not a Christian attorney. I'm sorry. I have certain standards from the Bible. You don't adhere to it, you're out. It just is what you can repent, you can make things right. But we need to have people that can tell people, okay, supposing there are divorces that take place. There will be some. As tragic as it is, there will be some. But what we should do is be saying, how do you make it so that you're not destroying an entire family unit? So we need to have people that can start to volunteer or do something, whether it is financial advising or planning, mediation services. What happens if you start to counsel people and all of a sudden they say, you know what, we thought we had a big problem. We just did not know how to communicate with each other. Or we did not know how to budget our money. And now that we fixed this one issue, there have been many people that have been on the verge of divorce or have been divorced and got remarried, and they've had a wonderful life afterwards. We need to stop the family destruction industry.
Yeah,
and they'll bitch about anything, right,
to be honest with you. And
it is a racket. It is a criminal enterprise, in my opinion.
Yeah,
and now that you were talking about politicians, so right now, we do have, last year we saw what happened among the Republicans going after the Attorney General of the state of Texas. And you have a revolt taking place among some of the grassroots people. Maybe we're going to get some of these rhino establishment people out. When it comes down to Democrats, some Democrats are great. But you know what, George? What we don't talk about is that Democrats should be clamoring for this more than we are, because look at the communities that they serve.
Right.
Broken families.
And that's a good point that you say that, because that's kind of one of my arguments to people, is that you shouldn't go red or blue, because when you're in family court, Jeff and I have advocated at the Capitol. We've seen good Republicans support this movement. We've seen good Democrats support this movement. This is not just a Republican issue. This is not just a Democrat issue. So if you're in San Antonio, where it's mostly Democrat run, you're going to find people that still align with this issue, because it crosses both sides of the aisle.
And the other thing is, like say in San Antonio, where you have much more of a Hispanic Mexican population, whose values, the Mexican values, as I understand them and know them, they're all about family. So it doesn't make a difference. You're right. If we'll say that Democrats vote mostly, or if Hispanics vote or Mexicans vote mostly Democrat, whatever. But the thing is, the representative should be representing you. And the most essential aspect of our society is the building block of the family. You can say the church, you can say other things as well. But if you have a nation of broken, fractured, weak families, you have a welfare state, you have a state leading toward communism, you have a broken society.
I mean,
And
but CPS, child support, the family district courts, anything the state puts their hands on is broken.
it's broken.
CPS,
And if it
child
wasn't
support
broken
system,
before, it will be broken.
Yeah, I mean, so at some point we need to take, the reins, and we need to start pushing these people out. And again, if you're a parent going through this, and you're in family court, you have a high conflict divorce case that's going on, or you're having issues co-parenting, just in my opinion, you need to get politically involved, because that's how you're gonna make a change in just your area, and just like Justice Divine, if you guys see Justice Divine, he's on place 4, is that right?
I'm not sure exactly,
I
but
think
yeah.
he's on place 4 of the Supreme Court. We need to keep Justice Divine in there. We need to make sure
He has
that,
been the best.
yeah.
He's for the people. He's for the rule of law and everything. But he understands that substance versus procedure.
Right.
Sometimes people will turn down your case. Well, this was not submitted with the right font, the right, you know.
Right. They use their rules and the Constitution as their shield and sword. They will block you from coming in or gaining transparency or accountability using the government code and the Constitution. But then when you use that back on them, there's no accountability.
Yeah.
The SCJC doesn't hold them accountable. The state bar doesn't hold them accountable. And really, and like I've always told people, it's these lawyers, these unethical lawyers, that pervert their own profession. It's like you go into church and expecting to receive, communion in church, right? You don't expect to go to communion and have a Ouija board there.
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
kind of how I use that analogy, right? When you go into family court, you're in there looking for justice. You're not in there looking to separate families and
Right.
and push him over the edge and financially.
Right. And when it comes down to the church, as you mentioned, talk to your church leaders. Every church leader should be involved. Some church leaders say we don't want to be involved in politics. I'm sorry, but you're going to have to be one way or another. If you're not going to be involved in some type of political expression, you will be ruled by fools and by tyrants and by communists. And, there's been a lot of times that you've seen it's the church that has risen up against communism. If you look at what happened in Europe in the 1990s, it was the movement of the church, the people that understood what their God-given identity was, what their freedoms were. And they said, this atheistic tyranny over top of us is depriving us of our ability to worship God as we ought to, and in Texas, to keep our families together. So you need to be talking to the church leaders. Again, I can speak to the church leaders. Church leaders want to try to weasel their way out of it. But this is probably the most important issue that the American church has not been facing. And because of that, you have a decline in membership too. When you have broken families, you've got people that often don't go to church. And then churches are saying, well, our membership is declining. Well, why is that? You have not been fighting for the essential building block of society and of our church families.
It's the same thing as these judges that complain about backlogs of their cases. It's because they reset, right? Same thing with the church, right? Y'all expect these things to go away, and y'all aren't exactly, keeping your promise or following the laws or the rules of the state. And that's a big issue for me. Some of y'all know that in Harris County, I was reset 25 times, and it sucks because I had to go from San Antonio to Harris County back to San Antonio 25 times. I lost count after 25. It's more than 25. But it costs money, it costs emotional and mental stress, wear and tear on your vehicle, and then ultimately the child loses. So overall, if you're looking for the best interest of the child, a lot of these things we talked about are in the best interest of the child. You should be able to freely rear your child as you believe, because that's your child. That's your family.
Family court is a game for attorneys,
Yeah.
and it is.
But my child's not
I know
supposed to be a pawn for these attorneys.
he
right?
should not be a pawn for these attorneys.
And if
Absolutely.
an attorney is taking my voice away for my child using unethical tactics or business type transaction tactics, right? That removing me should be prosecuted criminally.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
but we
It
gotta
is a
end-
criminal racket.
Yeah, but we got to end. I'd love to keep talking. I have
Yeah.
somebody else here that I got to meet with, but this was kind of just thrown together. We didn't really have any talking points.
Yeah, we just
but-
met down here.
But we have fun doing stuff like this. So we'll have more from Jeff soon. Stay tuned. We're gonna have more coming up. Go to the look for Jeff's YouTube videos. If y'all don't know who Jeff is, y'all need to search Jeff Morgan on YouTube and look at some of his videos. Jeff has gone over and beyond to expose this type of corruption, and he's a big player in the movement. I love the guy to death.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much, George.
So we'll talk later. You got
Anyway,
anything to say?
no, I was just going to say that for people that say, "What can you do?" When I worked on the Rick Santorum campaign, they used to ask Rick, "What can I do?" And Rick just said, "Well, I don't know, but do something." And you know what it did for me, George? I said, "Wait a minute, do something." That's a low bar. I can do something. And if we had every parent, every grandparent, because I'm big about my grandparents too, that have been impacted by this, every child of divorce, do something, we could take the system down, revamp it, whatever, but do something. Can you write a letter? Write a letter. Can you call up a legislator? Call a legislator. Can you talk with your church leader? Talk with your church leader. Can you tell somebody you shouldn't be doing it? If you have a friend who's going through a divorce, I'm going to screw her over. You shouldn't be doing this. Same thing with a woman. I'm going to go and I'm going to get this money and everything else. No. A child needs a father and a mother and grandparents and other things like
And
that.
if we hold everybody accountable in court, the child will win ultimately.
Yeah, yeah. When one parent wins, the child always loses.
Yeah, yeah. Just
So-
make it fair. Treat everybody, hold everybody accountable. Hold everybody transparent. Keep everybody equal, and the child will do just great.
So the documentary We the Parents, it's starting to be shown at various places throughout Texas. You can go to YouTube, just type in We the Parents. We the Parents is a documentary. It's about 52 minutes long, put out by Mike and Elizabeth McNeese from Ohio. It at a very high level talks about the family court situation, and it presents some solutions. It could have gone on for weeks and months and years, but it gave a very good overview, I think, too. So.
All right, we'll end it with this. Hey guys, we've exposed the problems. We're trying to implement solutions. If you have a problem, try looking for a solution. Bring it to your legislators, and remember how you vote. Watch those people, and again, go out and take notes from these judicial or these candidates that are running for judicial district courts, and see what they got to say. So,
George,
all right, Jeff. Thanks
great
for
to
having
see
me.
you, man. Hey, good to see you. Thanks
So-
so much.